Go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for being here. This is Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, MBRR podcast, MBRR Media. We're working on I don't know why I say we, to be honest with you, because it's literally just me. Everybody else I listen to, they've got like production staff and they got editors and everything else and what have you. And I say we all the time, but to some degree it is we because I have my channel members and channel supporters and I've three people now who come in at that show producer level, and one of them is IMAV from over on Subscribestar. So big thanks to IMAV, the Angry Vet from YouTube, who has just done a massive amount of channel membership gifting and whatnot for the show. And then my Anonymous from here in my region, who has given abundantly and greatly to the show. So I can't thank the show producers enough. All the other channel members, thank you so much for what you do. You do literally help keep the electricity on and keep the internet going, especially in this day and age with the way things are going in Minnesota. I'm surprised they haven't found a way to make electricity like super expensive for dissident voices like me. But yeah, that's a little bit of what we're going to be talking about tonight on the season premiere, season 4, episode 1 of Libertarian Lowdown, and you guys are in for a treat. If you don't follow on Twitter or X, you guys know I call it Twix. There is an individual, Jeremy Kauffman, who is well known. He might be a little bit of a firebrand on the Twitter sphere, on X. He has a way of, and I think he'll back me up on this. He has a way of getting attention. And some of you may know that I clipped out a video of Jeremy confronting FBI at his home here during the last election cycle, as they showed up to have a conversation with him about some I'm not even kidding you, social media comments that were made. And he's sent him packing. They told him to kick rocks. And they did, folks, and he did it the way you're supposed to. But so if you don't follow him on Twitter or X, you should. He's very easy to find, at Jeremy Kauffman, and we'll have the link, any of his links and whatnot that you might want to follow to learn more about what we're going to be talking about tonight will be down in the description of the video. And down there next to the description bar, there's that join thing. So hit that join if you're not a channel member yet. If you aren't if you are a channel member and you have friends that need to watch this, make sure that you share this out. If you haven't subscribed yet, do so. So we're gonna bring Jeremy on. I wrote it down to make sure I got it right. Jeremy is an entrepreneur, and the former executive director of the Free State Project, and you guys are in for a treat because the Free State Project is what all small government or no government people should be leaning towards. For all of you out there who think you're conservative and you think you're small government or whatnot, this is a conversation you should be listening to, and one that you need to be having with your friends and your political allies, and even people who you're not politically aligned with. You should be having this conversation because this is how you take back governance. Jeremy, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it.
Hey, it's great to be on, and I'm kind of disappointing on podcasts because people like me, being spicy on X, and then I come on shows and I'm just super reasonable. So I hope no one is going to be too disappointed. No, I'll try to throw a meatball in here there, But I like the longer form conversations. It actually lets you be reasonable and have these, more extended and more nuanced and more careful takes.
Exactly. You've got such a we live in such a microwave society now that even our politics and our philosophy have to be like condensed down into these microwave bites of, what is it now? Like, unless you have the blue check mark, you're still limited on Twix to what 144 characters or whatever it is, and sometimes you just have to be as snarky as possible just to get any kind of traction. So, no, I appreciate that. So since I led with, I didn't even warn you I was going to lead with it, but since I led with it, um, I know that you did get a lot of attention from outside of your normal circles because of your FBI interaction, and that was that October or I can't
Yeah,
remember.
I believe it was October of last year. Yeah,
Yeah.
before the election, and it certainly showed a potential direction, that this country could have gone. And I don't love all the directions we're going in currently necessarily, but there the sort of previous democratic regime was one of the most authoritarian and dangerous regimes that has existed in my in my lifetime, and
Yeah, we
certainly
may not, we maybe haven't walked completely away from the cliff, but we certainly have stepped back from the brink a smidge, just a
right.
smidge.
Yeah.
Well, now, just for those in the audience who haven't seen it, and I'll either link yours because you still have yours up on your X profile. But I clipped a short of it. I thought it was like that day when I saw it, I'm like, oh, I'm making a short out of this because this is amazing. Um, you got a visit from the FBI at your home because of some political and social commentary that you personally didn't even
Well,
do.
to be fair, they didn't disclose. I mean, they didn't disclose why they visited, and I think I think that's on the FBI if they're going to come to someone's house to say why why they're there. But I am I'm a free speech absolutist. I think it is good to have a maximalist culture in towards free speech, and I think even fairly provocative types of statements I think ought to be in bounds. They're part of American culture and they're part of our politics.
Well, isn't it? How do I want to say this? It's almost as if you limit even extremist commentary, no one's going to learn how to address it and how to push back on it because we're going to be so sheltered from even mildly offensive stuff that it'll be impossible for people to operate in society. And
Yeah. I
what?
mean, absolutely. Right. I think all I don't generally like the tabooing of ideas. I don't even like the tabooing of expression of racism or bigotry or whatever. And not everything that's called that actually is that with sort of
Right.
I think stricter and more accurate definitions. But yes, in general, we should be talking about these things. We don't want to have. There's sort of if you look at one of the sort of broader things that's happening currently is actually this whether certain discussions of World War II quote revisionism ought to be
Right.
in bounds or not. And I don't necessarily agree with some of these takes, but like they clearly ought to be in bounds. Like the tabooing of the discussion of certain topics I think is basically always wrong. We should have reasons, we should have facts and evidence and logical reasons that these are incorrect. We should not we should generally not be reaching for the tool of you can't talk about this at all. That's a bad solution.
Yeah. And so, even though they never did tell you why they were there, well, you didn't really. I mean, to be fair to the poor guys, you didn't give them much of a chance.
Yeah,
You
well,
were way over that. You were the authority on scene that day.
I will
So
say I saw on your channel you have a number of videos of police interactions and recording police and this kind of thing, and that's something this was not my first interaction with police officers. I'm actually generally pretty good at it. My wife says I'm a cop whisperer because every time I get pulled over, I never get given a ticket. But you practice these kinds of things to get
right.
comfortable. Because certainly like even if you've been in these kinds of situations before. Like, you're going to feel anxiety. You're going to feel like you're going to feel some nervousness. It's not, but like anything else, it gets, the 10th time you're on the stage is easier than the first time you're on the stage, and so you can get better at asserting yourself, against these authority figures, and you can practice in smaller situations, whether, it's a DUI stop or, or other things. And that's part of the culture here in New Hampshire, as part of the Free State movement, is that we stand up for ourselves, we assert ourselves, and we defend our rights. And so this is something that has gone back, that other people have done here before me. Maybe didn't get quite as much attention as this particular video, but this is something that there are lots of people who do that, and I know that there will be lots of people who will have my back. So I'm also not doing it by myself.
So we happen to operate kind of, I mean, you run in a circle that's several circles like broader than mine, because you have some, I mean, immediately after you had your FBI encounter, the esteemed Tom Woods brought you on to have the conversation. And weren't you on with Dave on Part of the Problem shortly after that as well?
Yeah, I've been on Part of the Problem a number of times. I've been on
Yeah.
Timcast a number of times. I sort of cross between more broader right-wing circles and libertarian circles. I consider
Right.
myself a right-wing libertarian.
Yeah.
But I also think there are aspects of this is maybe a tangent, so you can get me off of this.
No, this is why I do Libertarian Lowdown. It's for this.
Well, I think there's a common sort of misunderstanding of libertarianism, that it sort of dictates a certain amount of that sort of requires a certain amount of permissiveness that I don't feel is true. Libertarianism is a set of axioms of, we own our property, we own ourselves, and from there we can contract and agree with others. And those are atoms that allow the construction of a wide variety of societies, and so I actually see, and then this is also perhaps partially sort of the synthesis of the Free State movement working in New Hampshire as well, where we're generally working with conservatives and Republicans, and there's not too much. The Democrats mostly hate us,
Right.
but like, libertarianism is a method for giving people what they want, so
Right.
Even a religious conservative who wants perhaps a different society than other people might want, libertarianism is actually a set of tools that can give them that. Because
Exactly.
if you own your property, you can come together with your property and you can create, so to me, libertarianism both entails more permissiveness and it entails the creation of things that are more, it actually allows for both. And so it doesn't strictly dictate these kinds of things. The point is that we're doing these things voluntarily and not coercively. And so if a bunch of people want to voluntarily live in a place that's free of hard drugs, or free of prostitution, or free of various things, or even free of things that I would want in my society, they have the right to do that too. And libertarianism is actually a tool that allows them to do that, versus this set of things that says we have to be highly permissive of all kinds
of things. Right. That's my adult son yesterday was picking on me, and he goes, "Libertarians are nothing but leftists who don't know how to commit."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah,
okay, fair, but not true. Like, so, and that's, I love what you said too, that I have a friend who I have swayed, and that's, and I'm sure you've had this experience, or maybe you haven't. Your arguments tend to be rather persuasive. So what I have learned in my one, you never identify yourself as a libertarian. Somebody else always has to do it first, and and uh, and then other libertarians have to come out and demand that you believe the way they do, so that they can reject you as a libertarian. Once those two things have happened, then you've arrived as a libertarian. But you start to talk to people about these philosophies and the motivating roots behind libertarian philosophy and ideology, and most of the time, at least for me, most people are swayed less by these extremely erudite arguments and far more just by the conversations that you might be having with somebody else. And what you said about the freedom of association aspect of libertarianism is abundantly true. You may all get together and form, I know everybody hates that word, some sort of libertarian commune, and all decide that everybody in your community is going to be, armed. They're going to be armed for the protection of the community, for themselves and whatnot. At any point, any member of that community could change their mind and say, you know what, I've decided I don't want to bear firearms. They're not going to a true libertarian community is not going to, like go to your house and make you carry a gun all day long, all the way around. They're just going to say, hey, these were the established rules that we agreed upon freely. You're free to disassociate from this community at any time. And that is something that you cannot get most people on the left side of the authoritarian spectrum or the right side of the authoritarian spectrum to understand, that you can choose to cooperate with whatever community you're in. And that's ultimately how tyranny and bad governance happens, is you just kind of acquiesce to societal norms and pressures. And what libertarian, correct me if you think I'm saying this improperly, but what libertarian thought, or anarcho-capitalism, or whatever people are wanting to label themselves as today, really kind of comes down to, I get to determine for myself and my household, if I have children, what's best for us, and you don't get to infringe on that just because you have the power. And people have a really hard time with that.
I think that's mostly right. I just think there's where maybe some libertarians a lot of people work backwards from the outcomes that they want politically, and there certainly is a cohort of libertarians. I think they're a minority, but there is a cohort of libertarians who they want a highly permissive society, a non-judgmental society, right? A society where all kinds of behaviors are welcomed and not judged, and it's a highly permissive society. And they see libertarianism as a tool of creating that kind of society. And now I do think libertarianism allows for that kind of society. So I don't think that type of society is contrary to libertarianism.
But it's not the natural outcome.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll give you an example. You feel free about it. I don't mind. You can call me a bad libertarian, whatever. But I won't.
No,
I don't.
That would be completely bad libertarian on my part. Then
I don't want prostitution on my street. I want to live in a neighborhood with other families. I don't want prostitution on the street. That's I don't want to coercively fund the production of that good, right? I believe people should be voluntarily paying for it. The homeowners in the area should be agreed on this rule and on this principle. But I don't see it as enabling this kind of anything goes kind of thing. And so I think libertarianism, actually properly understood, allows for this substantial diversification, where more people get what they want, and people who want a highly libertine community can have a highly libertine community, and people who want more and there's a vast set of spaces that's possible.
Right. And ultimately what it comes down to is avoiding that overarching, all-encompassing authoritarian umbrella of, we have to have these people up here over us telling us how to live, or no one's going to live the right way. And it's going to, to quote, Ghostbusters, it's going to be, pandemonium and chaos, dogs and cats living together, that right. kind of mentality.
So it's state and federal stuff is by far the biggest problem. I still don't like, even at the local level, I think democracy often, creates bad outcomes. But at the local level, I do think sort of coercive behavior, the localer you get, the more coercive behavior I sort of becomes permissible. Like when we're talking about the level of my block, my neighbors and I do actually get to care about the behavior, that happens
each other,
dominate one another, necessarily. And I don't think we should necessarily be democratically voting on, whether you can raise a chicken or whatever. I'm not, but we have to have ways. Libertarianism can't entail that everything goes everywhere. This is just not right. A society that that the vast majority of people will want to live in. Whereas if it's a set of tools that allows people to come together, and it's a set of building blocks that allows for the creation of different things, then a lot more people get what they want. And this is a point that I'm a fan of David Friedman's work, The Machinery of Freedom. And a lot of this sort of view of anarcho-capitalism is that you make people pay for the laws and the production of the things that they want, and you don't fund them coercively, and you don't try to police people 100 miles away from you or 1,000 miles away from you, as we're often doing under the American federal system, where I'm being taxed to stop someone from doing right. something 2,000 miles away from me, which is just a completely a completely crazy and a completely insane, idea to me. But the idea that people might, put in money to fund the production of something locally, whether that be a school or a library or a good, like a clean park or, these kinds of things, I think this kind of stuff becomes, is perfectly okay with me.
And just as a side note for my regular audience, I did not pay Jeremy to bring up chickens. I don't. It just was a happen. Long story short, I have illegal backyard chickens. I'm not even kidding you. I did not jump through all the hoops that my city wants me to jump through, and one of them was before it. And I'm only explaining this because you brought it up. Before I can even fill out the permit application and pay the permit application fee, which does not guarantee me the approval of the permit, I have to first go and get written permission from all of my neighbors to have chickens. They don't have to have written permission to have a dog or a cat, but I have to have written permission from my neighbors. And I said no. I'm like, no, my chickens aren't going to hurt my neighbors. Like, they're just not. I don't like that's the most asinine thing in the world. And I just said no. And so they've sent me several letters going, you don't have permit for those. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, I don't. And so
Yeah, I mean, I have mixed feelings about it. Certainly, I don't have a problem with my neighbors having chickens. I do think we want to have people. I want the busybodies to get what they want. I want them to have their sort of busybody area that's not near
right.
me. To be clear, like
you want Karens to have their own Karen commune. That's what you want.
Their own Karen ghetto. They can have a Karen. They can have. Well, I also think I've kind of come around on also some of the Karen thing where like some aspect of this, like people who sort of help nudge the world around them into being a sort of more ordered or more pro-social fashion, like the woman or the man who actually does nag someone to put their shopping cart back, like this is actually pro-social behavior. There certainly is a degree that's excessive and wrong, so there's something to this stereotype as well, but like directionally, like part of the problem is at times too much too much tolerance. And so again, it's really about what's the scale and where and how are you doing these kinds of things. And also another sort of adjacent issue here is, and this is kind of an unsolved problem, I would say, is you have these huge selection effects where the people who want to be in the roles of government, you're selecting for the busybodies, the nosy people, the people who and because you see this even in HOAs, which are ostensibly private government, right? Libertarians, that's what we say is the answer.
Right, exactly. And I tell people that all the time. Like, city council, I don't like as much. HOA, if you choose to live in one, then that's like the most direct form of say you could possibly have.
Yeah, but of course, like this stereotype is not inaccurate that you get these kinds of ridiculous outcomes in HOA situations, and I think fundamentally this is because you still have your HOA run as a democracy, and the person who wants to like left alone and not be nosy doesn't get involved, and the people who want to be nosy and want to bother others, they're the ones who get involved. And so you have this, you're always selecting away from the kinds of people who want to be left alone. And this is a problem we have even here in New Hampshire, although I will say one of the things that counters this is we have this culture as part of the broader movement that says, hey, you're a good person if you get involved. You're being really helpful if you run for office, because you're going to run for office, you're going to get that position, and you're going to be reasonable, and you're not going to be the insane busybody. But it's, a lot of libertarians like dropping out. They like, and they're not wrong, by the way. I'm not like shaming them. They like, they want to drop out. They want to be illegible to the system. They want to, but what we're trying to do here in New Hampshire, where we're actually trying to take over the state government, right? We have 100-ish people that are elected in the state house right now. We have we're sort of going up the hierarchy where our people are now running for.
Say that again, by the way, just so people can hear. So
like I should. Yeah, we have 100. So
100-ish.
100-ish.
You can't even count after the 100.
I'll qualify that because that's a hard number to believe. So first of all, we do have a very large state house here, but there's an organization called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. It's run by some longtime libertarians. I believe the people who founded it are lifetime LP members. Like these are proper libertarians. They go through and not that every Libertarian Party member is a proper libertarian, but they go through and they grade every vote. So they say this is the Libertarian vote on this specific bill. They go every single bill, and then they calculate percentages for every representative. What percentage of time did they vote the Libertarian way? I think anyone who went through line by line and how they picked their votes would say this is a Libertarian organization. I agree with them 99% of the time. Okay, and I'm a Libertarian, so I can still find ways to disagree. But they then
bread and butter.
They produce a score, and it's over 100 people are voting the Libertarian way 9 out of 10 times or more. And I think if you're voting the Libertarian way 9 out of 10 times, I think that's fair to say.
That's fair.
You know, that's the standard I use is did you vote the Libertarian way at least 9 out of 10 times? And we have around 100 people who do that.
That's huge in, you know, because New Hampshire is geographically, New Hampshire is not overly large, and it doesn't have an incredibly dense population.
Yeah, it's a population of around 1.5 million people. The southern half of the state is relatively dense, but not city dense. It's like it's suburban. I would call it, or in between. I don't know the full continuum, but it's suburban. And there's an incredible density of people here. I mean, I was at an event last night. We had a dinner party, family friendly dinner. There were probably, and it's all at a Libertarian clubhouse. So we have Libertarian clubhouses, these private event spaces. And last night we had a dinner party with lots of kids running around. And tonight there will be a D&D game for the there's just constantly stuff happening culturally and socially.
You just ruined the street cred of your D&D group.
I've gone to the D&D game twice now. I've been taking my 7-year-old to learn to play some D&D. I haven't played in over a decade, but I thought that since my son was curious about it, now it's a chance to teach him a little.
I haven't played since they revised everything from second edition. I don't even recognize all the numbers anymore.
I know enough to know that people have strong opinions about this, but I don't know enough to have a strong opinion myself. Because I've been kind of checked out of the game.
I would be the guy that'd walk in and go, "What's your Thaco?" And all the new people would be like,
I think we're playing 3.5, which I think is is somewhat old, but I don't know.
I remember Gary Gygax, so
I'm a nerd. I am interested in some of these spaces, and these scenes have been very harsh and rude to some people who I think are heroes, at least heroes in the space of these areas. And they're trashing the reputations of now Wizards of the Coast or whoever owns it is trashing the reputations of these people who invented the damn game. And which I think is kind of disgusting, actually. So
it's like being part of a well, since we're on the nerd topic, it's like being part of a book club or a book reading group or whatever you want to call it, and somebody suggests reading something by Lovecraft, and they're like, "You can't read Lovecraft. He said mean things about people," and I'm like, "He was still a great author. Well, a little eclectic, but why can't you read his stuff? We can't endorse that." I'm like, it's out there. There's nothing you can do about it. The books are still there. So yeah, it's strange how people's minds operate. So you were executive director of the Free State Project in New Hampshire for I don't even remember how long. I did at one time know how long you were part, but
I think it was for a little over 2. It was 2 to 3 years. I was doing that.
Was that kind of full-time work for you, or were you doing that on the side of as well as being an entrepreneur?
I was actually doing it. I was doing 2 jobs, at the same time. I'm sort of someone. I actually, compared to a lot of libertarians, especially because a lot of libertarians tend to be more solo entrepreneurs. Like I've had a lot of executive experience. I've managed, relatively large numbers of people. I also have a lot of experience actually managing libertarians at this point, which I think are because a lot of the software engineers I've employed have libertarian leanings, and it's we are a special people. We can be a little bit we tend to be very independent minded. Can be a little bit ornery or standoffish at time, and so you've got to you've got to give libertarians space. You've got to, you can't be too top down, and so you've got, I have some practices I've sort of developed to try to get libertarians to work together and be cooperative, because we do, you can get a lot more done when you're a part of a group like that. This is, groups do more things than individuals, and that is, I think that's actually something that some libertarians, not saying you, but some libertarians do, sort of need to work on this and learn this, how to be part of a team, how to accept that you're not getting 100% of what you want. I actually, one of the things I'm going to make my kids do at some point, although I don't think they'll need to be strong on too much. I think it's really important for people to play team sports, for example. I think team sports teach you,
Right.
that sometimes you've got to subvert, you've got to, you got to put the team first. The coach called the play. It doesn't matter if you think the play is stupid. You got to do what the coach says, because you're not going to succeed if you run your own play. Like you can't run your own play on the football field if there's another play called, even if that's a bad play. And so learning this kind of thing, I think, is important. And some libertarians, like, if they don't get 100% of what they want, they can't be a team player. And I think that's a bad attitude,
So most of us libertarians at some point in our lives were all cross country runners, and it's because you're part of a team, but you can still do your own thing.
Yeah, well, see, that's what I think. I know. I want them to play like basketball or football or soccer or any number of where you're on the field and you've got, like, the goals for the group to win, and like you've got to interact. You've got to meet the team in the world where it is. You're not going to get 100% of what you want, but you still want to win. And then, like, I'm a very competitive person. I like winning. I want to win. I want the teams that I'm a part of to be the best. I want the groups that I'm a part of to be the best. This is a foundational to my psychology. And similarly here with the movement, here I want us to win. I want a libertarian homeland. I mean, to me, we're not even 5%. We're 5 to 10% of where we want to be, or what I think is ultimately possible. It feels like everything's accelerating. It feels like everything's headed in a good direction. But I want a lot more. I'm hungry for a lot more and to accomplish a lot more.
Well, and I think one of the great weaknesses, we euphemistically here in Minnesota with the state level party, we refer to our group as being rather tizzy. We've got a lot of people have those autistic traits, and couple of the people in leadership. I know we're not. That's one of those bad words for libertarians, but a couple of people in party leadership. That's their struggle, is getting people to get involved and do things. They're like, yeah, like you're all on. You want the same things that we want, but nobody will get involved, and it's a bit like trying to herd cats in a tornado, quite frankly, is what it doesn't go well, because as you said, and I think most people who tend to lean the direction philosophically that we do, they've just had enough of being told what to do, and they have a hard time stepping back from the being told what to do aspect and recognizing that it's not being told what to do, it's talking through what's best to accomplish the end goal that you're aiming for. And that's been one of the things that's been so inspirational for me in watching what you guys have going on, is that your group has been willing to take that step back, dismiss not people, but dismiss the ideology that says you have to do everything independently, but you've all come together out there to work towards the goal of having, like you said, a libertarian home state. And I can't think of any other way that you could have accomplished it if you guys were not working together as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there's one of these things where every in group that you're a part of, like, thinks their in group is, they're fighting, and we never disagree. We disagree, and like no one can get along is how everyone feels about their in group. And then it's like the out group is they're so organized and they're so effective, and why can't we be like the out group? But I think there is a little bit of a bias here, where once you're on the inside, like some religious institution or like some corporation, you're like, oh wow, they're so functional and together, and then once you're on the inside, it's like it's also chaos, and there's also
What a
so I do
what a
you know, and so
crap
we have-
show! How did this happen?
so we certainly we certainly have some of that, but we do have a lot of cohesion as well. You know what actually helps a lot with cohesion on every sports team I've been a part of? Winning.
Right.
And so I think the fact that we're making progress certainly helps keep things together, whereas it's hard, in a lot of states, it feels like you're beating your head against the wall, and so you're asking people to do what's effectively charity work. This is another important aspect. As libertarians, we are generally we're not against charity. I'm not a full Randian in this view, although I also think she kind of no true Scotsman altruism. But anyway, it is charity. And so, well, how do humans solve the problem of charity? It's irrational behavior, arguably, to run into a burning building, and save someone, right? But this is pro-social behavior. This is behavior that we want people to do. We want people to take that initiative and to do this kind of thing. And so one of the ways we solve this is culture, right? We say you're a hero. We lift you up. You say this person is so great, and so you have to have a culture that's elevating and lifting these people up. As libertarians, we can sometimes not say the glorification of cops or the glorification of the military, right? And I would agree that this goes too far. But directionally, the idea that it's an impulse that's good because it's trying to it's an impulse that's saying, hey, this job is like running into a burning building. These people are, and we're trying to subsidize a charitable job. And again, I think cops are overpaid. The danger of the job is overstated. I'm not wholly defending this. I'm just saying the impulse of wanting to elevate people who are taking on risks.
It's finding a way to encourage that behavior in all people and not just hand that role over to someone because of a uniform and a status.
Yeah, absolutely. Also true that we want to encourage more people to act independently and not rely, go talk to your neighbor, don't call the cops on your neighbor, go talk to them first, these kinds of things I think are very good things. But of course also elderly women are going to need someone to call, you can't, you also need, there is some role. So I'm in favor of, more privatized solutions, privatized police, rather than, no police. I think there is always going to be some necessity for these kinds of things, but we can do them in more libertarian, ways.
That, I'm sure you've never had to have this conversation before, but it starts off with the roads. It's like my roads, bro. Yeah. People do not. We've been so inculcated with this mentality that there are certain aspects of everything that we have in society that are rooted in the tradition of the fact that, well, my whole life we've always had them, so therefore this is the way it was intended to be, and only an overreaching umbrella organization can provide those things. And you brought up HOAs earlier, and I ask people all the time, I said, have you ever noticed that you constantly get taxed for new roads, and then every 5 to 10 years they come back through and tell you that they have to redo your road? And I said, now go find a friend that lives in an HOA and tell me what condition their road is in compared to yours. Well, that's different. I'm like, what? Well, that's private. I'm like, bingo. It's private, and they are taking care of it because it's private.
Look, I certainly agree with you, and I am at heart, an anarcho-capitalist. So the idea of doing everything privately whenever possible is the best possible thing. The other thing, though, is this stuff, these sort of quote, we can call them edge cases, maybe that's the wrong term, but these sort of the hardest, let's call it the hardest problems, which I think it's fair to say that privately solving national defense is on the harder side of the spectrum. Well, we can just leave that stuff for last. We don't have to argue about that. We can say, let's get rid of the fact that 80% of the federal budget is entitlements, is welfare programs and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, and obviously the military is very wasteful, but we don't have to argue about eliminating the military and who will build the roads. If we got rid of the rest of the stuff, the government would be 1/10 the size, which would be tremendous progress. So
we'd be a lot less upset about how much roads cost.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. I actually, regularly look at pie charts, the breakdown of the New Hampshire, budget. So I like to do these numerical calculations. I do it in my own household. I like know how much devices cost me per day and these the kinds of things. And so like, I know that the police in my city cost about $40 a person a month. That's what it actually costs to provide the police. The roads of the state budget, it's like 1% of the state budget is roads. It's like 2%. It's a small percent of the budget. Like, could the roads be better? Probably. Let's tackle the 20% that we're spending on,
Right.
public schools. And we'll do the roads after that. I'm not trying to say don't try to do it, but there's plenty to work on. And how much I do think. I mean, actually, I don't know. The roads may be different in Minnesota. I'm sure there are efficiency gains that can be made on roads in New Hampshire. Coming from Philadelphia, where there'd always be like 6 guys standing for 1 person working, in New Hampshire, like the roads are okay. The roads aren't high on my problem. Maybe we could do it 30% more efficiently if they were privatized. I don't know what the number is. Whereas some of this stuff is 90% waste, or some of it, like some of the stuff that Doge is cutting at the federal level. It's like we're literally funding our enemies. We're literally, not only are we stealing money from people, and then we're taking the stolen money to propagandize children into believing the exact opposite of the things that we believe. And and so if we're going to sort of rank dollars, like that's the worst money that's being stolen from us to advance the agendas of our enemies. That's the worst dollars. Roads and a sort of and court and a court system are like the best dollars. I'm not saying we can't improve upon them, but we can we can eat from the worst dollars towards the towards the best dollars.
Well, I think the reason that something like roads come up, and now I'm starting to actually hear it more from, and I know you've heard this argument. Well, you don't like socialism. What do you think police and fire departments are? Yeah. But the reason that roads come up so often is because people like to go to straw manning every single argument that they're presented with, and that's how they straw man. They go, "Oh, so you think roads should be privatized?" I'm like, "Well, if you want to boil it down, like ultimately, I think everything should be. But like you said, can we actually address, for the lack of better terminology, the elephant in the room right now, which is wasteful spending, all those other, and that's what's so bad. And of course, we all know this, the uniparty, the duopoly, they love the wasteful spending. And so they're always going to throw out the red herrings and the scare tactics of those people. You don't want them around because they want to take your roads away from you. They're not actually going to point at the real problems that we want to see solved. And like you said, with Doge is making some great examples of things that could be cut. The problem is that it's wasteful spending, and we know that ultimately there's 1, maybe 2 people that'll stand up to that kind of waste at the federal level.
Yeah, well, part of the problem here, and this is a tricky one to solve, is people don't really, at least with some of the spending, a lot of the school and health spending is the people would never put it in these terms, but the wastefulness is actually part of the point, in the sense that it's substantially a signaling thing. Like I of course any amount of money for children because I care about children so much.
Right.
Of course any amount of money for healthcare because I care about people so much. And so this sort of desire to be a good person, which is a good impulse, right? Like is sort of gets hijacked and gets taken advantage of, for this endless amount of money, where there's no amount of money that's ever enough. Like the government school spending just goes up and up and up and up and up, and people feel, not you and I, but like sort of normies, sort of feel like it would be it would be wrong. It would be I like kids. How can you hate libraries?
Yes.
And they feel like they're being asked to condemn things that they think of as good, and sort of these efficiency arguments just don't really hit they hit people like us. They hit more sort of systematic type thinkers, but sort of people who are very feelings based. I think these arguments about efficiency don't really hit them, and they just sort of feel like that this is the right thing to do.
I think the interesting, schools are another close to home. Well, I mean, they are for everybody these days, but we're going through a referendum cycle here. They had a 2-part referendum in our most recent local election. If the first part of it passed, then you had to vote if the first part passed, then do you want X on the second part? So I don't know what happened. Honestly, it's so confusing to me. They won the first part, but lost the second part in one election. And now they've come back and they're holding a special election just for the second part now, less than a year later. And the argument is, but don't you care about the kids?
They're
And
yeah.
and everybody's like, well, it's worth it to have your property tax go up because more people are going to want to move to town. And I'm like, I don't think you're thinking about this the way a normal person would think about this. People aren't going to come to town because you are voting to have property taxes raised before they get here so that more money can go to a school system that's already failing. That's not how people choose where they're going to move at all. That's just not how they choose.
Yeah.
They might go,
yeah.
are your schools good? Yes. But they're going to actually look to see if the school's good, not just whether or not you're spending money.
Yeah. Yeah. These people are relentless. And for them, it's not charity, right? You're doing charity to try to stop the spending, and they get paid, and so all of it's a very asymmetric system. Like, all the incentives are very wrong. We had it happen here where there's this interesting story about the Underwood family in Croydon, where they actually did get the town we have this town meeting system. I can explain that. It's basically just like a local direct democracy is how smaller towns operate in New Hampshire. So everyone gets together in a room and you raise your hands and you change the rules of your local town. And
it's like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls.
Yes, it's exactly like that. Yeah, my wife loves that show. And so I've seen a number of episodes.
So sorry.
It seems like a relatively wholesome show, and they cut the money in half, and a national political machine, including the New York Times, NPR, millions of dollars flooded the neighborhood. They door knocked, and they successfully were able to undo it through a massive advertising campaign. And so we're of course not giving up. We're fighters, and so some of the things that are now happening. We have a really good school choice program. So now it's easier and easier to get out of the schools where you can take your portion of the money and do whatever you like with it. Is
that at the state level that you guys got school choice enshrined and codified?
Yep, we do, and it's been there for a while, and now in this current session, so there is an income cap on it currently. It's like 3 or 4 times the poverty level, which is a decent amount of money. Like middle class families are eligible, but they're removing the income cap this year, so it's going to be full school choice for everyone in the state. You get the state portion of the spending, so you don't get the municipal spending, but you get the state portion. So the way it works is there's state and municipal spending that gets combined. The state portion of the spending follows the child, and you get complete discretion, essentially, over how there's no restrictions on how you use it. So if you choose to home educate your kids, you can use that money towards that. Correct. You can buy gymnastics class, you can buy private tutoring, you can buy software, you can buy workbooks, curriculums, whatever.
Wow.
And I have four kids. We homeschool all of our kids. Great, sort of homeschooling scene here. Yeah.
Wow, I did not realize you guys had that system in place. Was it? Oh, maybe you don't know, but did the system fight you guys really hard on that? Was it? Pretty bloody, so to speak.
This is one of the. There's a guy here, Jason Osborne, who's the House Majority Leader. He's probably the most politically successful Free Staters, or is one of the most politically successful Free Staters. And he, I give him the most. It's obviously a bunch of people involved in getting this passed, but I give him a lot of credit because he made a very big brained political move, which was we had the first sort of, I don't know if it's the first bill. It's called House Bill 1 is the budget bill. So I guess it must be the budget bill. The budget bill is called House Bill 1. And so it must be the first bill of the year. But basically, he, in a somewhat unorthodox thing, jammed school choice into the budget. And so instead of it being separate votes, they would have had to the first version of school choice was small. It wasn't 4 times the poverty level. It was like twice the poverty level only. And he packed it into the budget and basically forced the governor. I don't think the governor wanted the school choice program at the time, but he would have had to veto the entire budget. And there was a bunch of other stuff, in the budget that he essentially wanted. So it was like a game of brinksmanship where they packed the school choice into this budget bill wasn't traditionally done that way, and kind of forced the governor's hand to sign the bill. And since then, this is cool. Normally
that's genius. Use the system against them.
Yeah, we have this. It's like the ratchet effect where like things only move in one direction and they don't move backwards. Like that's kind of how I feel like where we are. There's like a liberty ratchet, and so you'll start with something small and you'll just pry it open, and it just gets like a little bit better year after year, and it can be very slow going at times. But it feels like things are almost never backsliding and always like inching forward. Just a little bit. So this school choice one where we're finally going to get school choice with no income cap, full school choice. We're like 5 or 6 years now from the first version of school choice, and when that happened,
that's
just
absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
One of the things that I hear, and I'm sure you hear it too, probably far more than I do because of the networking that you do, but I talk to people from all over the country who have, libertarian ideals and leanings, but they stay enmeshed in the duopoly because libertarians just can't get traction. They just can't get anywhere. They can't win any elections. Sure, you might get 1 or 2 on a city council somewhere, or you might get one in as a mayor somewhere, but you can't get anywhere where the actual decisions are being made. And I constantly point to what you guys have accomplished in New Hampshire and say, like, not every single one of the people who votes this free state agenda is 100% in lockstep with the, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire or even the LNC. There are a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily align themselves in the party itself, but as you've already said, will vote that way 90 to 99% of the time. What do you say to the people in states like Minnesota and other places that are struggling to get traction? How do you encourage them, besides going, oh no, it's the ratchet effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not. We do mostly work through the Republican Party. I don't think that this is bad. I think this is one of the ways that you can get things done. I think the Libertarian Party does exist, so I think it's good for libertarians to be a part of it because you don't want it to these people have a lot of influence over the label and what it means, and you don't want them to you don't want that to get sort of taken over by leftists or whatever. And so sort of like the Libertarian Party, this argument over like whether it's a social club or not, like there's a take that's I'm not totally convinced of this one necessarily, but like the Libertarian Party is a social club and that's good. Okay, this is for the hardcores, this is for all the ways, and so this is where you're keeping that momentum, you're making sure that voice is represented. And so what we do is we're kind of half friendly with the Republicans, but we also will call them out and keep that kind of keep them accountable. We don't want it is a real thing that people are affected by who they're surrounded by, and so you can take a good libertarian and maybe they get surrounded by too many statists or whatever, and they start to drift away from their pure principles. And so I think the Libertarian Party can serve a role of keeping libertarians who work with the Republican Party oriented in the right direction. But there are a number of state reps who are literally members of our party, lifetime members of our party, former members of our party. Sometimes they have to drop the membership to run or be affiliated, but they're still sort of spiritually with us, and we have friendly relationships with a bunch of elected representatives, and they mostly like what we do at the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire. They're not going to necessarily wear it on their sleeve, right, because there is an aspect, and I don't blame Republicans for this. There's an aspect of if you're in a political party, they want you to be party first, and so that does also mean some of our sort of more successful people, I think, they get flack from the purists, like they're holding their nose and voting for something that they don't actually want to vote for, or they're horse trading. Like there's been plenty of horse trading
Right.
where, because the Libertarians do not control the Republican Party in New Hampshire. We're a faction of the Republican Party. We're maybe about half the party, a third to a half of the party. So we're a really big faction, but it's not every Republican in New Hampshire is a Libertarian, not making that claim in the slightest. And so there is horse trading that happens where it's like the sort of more conservative wing of the Republican Party wants X and the Libertarians want Y, and they agree, okay, we'll support you. We'll vote for X if you vote for Y, and that sort of keeps the party working together. And I think this is mostly a good system.
When you look at it at the federal level, obviously the Ron Paul name comes in. Rand Paul's up, part of that, but we don't hear a lot of people outside of Rand Paul now, and of course Thomas Massey, who's takes an undue amount of guff for standing on principle. Do you think that holds a lot of people back from actually voting that truly libertarian perspective once they get in as Liberty Caucus types in the Republican Party? I mean, you've already said, like, you're not going to break into the Democrat Party, no matter what state you're in. You're just not.
I am encouraging. I don't know if it'll work it out, but I actually am cheering on the sort of more left libertarians in our movement to go be Democrats. Like I didn't like Chase Oliver running for office under the Libertarian Party, but I think he'd be a great Democrat, right? Like my ideal, imagine if you're
Oh yeah,
like, he'd be the best in the country, right? I understand he's closer to my positions on any number of issues than the average Democrat, and so the idea, my ideal ballot is like I'm voting between Chase Oliver and Dave Smith, like Chase Oliver as the Democrat and Dave Smith as the Republican, and like that's the only choice that everyone has. I think that's a great political system.
Yeah, like win for us no matter what,
But I think I got off of I think I didn't address the central part of the of the question there, which was
the difficulty of once you're in, especially with the Republican Party, and you tend to be more libertarian minded. You come from maybe a Miesian background or whatever, and then you run into these roadblocks where all of a sudden some big mouth is attacking you because you didn't do that thing they want, and then it feels like you're not accomplishing anything anyway. How do you address that? How do you encourage people
I think it's unfortunately kind of a hopeless or nearly unwinnable situation. I mean, the most fundamental problem here is that by my count, like at the upper end, 10% of Americans are libertarians or hold libertarian values. And so we are minorities. I don't love this oppression, type of language, as it's not natural in my psychology to see myself as this oppressed person. But I think it is, somewhat objectively true that libertarians just are a dominated minority. And so in a democracy, minorities get dominated. That's just like kind of what happens. So, we managed to sneak a couple of through, we have our reps like the way that like the Muslims have one or two, and it's like,
right. Yeah.
It's like, but that Muslim rep is going to be highly ineffective at creating Sharia law in the United States. Not that all Muslims want that. I'm not trying to be
but your point is well received in that it's, you won office, but what are you actually accomplishing? And I think that's where, you see it. I've had this conversation with people here in Minnesota. People I have a lot of respect for. They're like, hey, look, I get it. I really appreciate what you're saying and what you're trying to do, but I'm sticking with the Republicans because it's the only inroad that I have to get anything accomplished that aligns with what you and I agree on. And I'm like, okay, but is that true? Because
I think what they've done.
Let's just whether or not I don't know what your personal perspective on Thomas Massey is, but the guys think it's
huge fan. Thomas Massey for king is my perspective.
Which of course he would immediately reject. So
I actually have a video I've shared on X a couple of times. I went up to him in person and asked him if he would seize control of the United States. I was like, would you, Mr. Massey, would you lead?
I don't know how I missed that, but now I got to go look for it. But you look at I knew you were a fan. I just didn't want to put it out there for you. But you look at let's just be honest. He stood on principle, and of course, the talking head, we're going to primary him and get rid of him. Now, he's said that 2 other times prior to this, and an organization which will remain unnamed, APAC, has threatened massive amounts of money against him in a primary. And you kind of scratch your head and go, why? Like, this is what we're dealing with, folks. This is why you are having a hard time. It's not that the libertarians aren't principled. It's not that they don't make good points. It's that no one who actually thinks, or let me rephrase that. People who actually think will sit down and have these conversations with the masses of the world, but everybody else is just so blindly loyal to a figurehead that they'll just jump on the bandwagon and attack anybody that's principled like that, because being principled doesn't win elections. And that's what I think bothers me and others. And I'm sure to some degree it bothers you.
Yeah. Well, look, as someone who explicitly supported Trump, not because I thought he was perfect, but because he was better than the other option, and I still do believe that, the attacks on Massey are certainly one of the most disappointing things that he's done. Massey's the best Republican. Massey's trying to actually introduce bills to do the things that Trump says he wants to do, and Trump's fighting him. It's a ridiculous situation. I do think, oddly, it's actually been good for Massey in the sense that it's made Massey stronger as one of the few forces who can oppose Trump and win. Like, generally, when Trump tries to primary someone, he's successful, and Massey has been challenged by Trump before. He's come out on top, and this has made him now one of the most powerful forces within the Republican Party. And so if there is a move away from the MAGA within the Republican Party, potentially some of that, flows to energy and support behind him, would be an optimistic, interpretation of that. It is also true, though, that people have a ton of party loyalty, and they don't generally consider, a lot of people don't consider the issues. They see themselves as Republicans or Democrats. They go and they vote Republican or Democrat. I'll give you an example where we have a state rep here. His name is Brandon Finney. Among his accomplishments as a state rep, he made it, he eliminated public consumption laws at events and various things. So we can now have festivals with drinking on stage and this, and I'm sure he's done some other things, but that's just one of the things I know he's done. And he ran as a Republican and he got elected. He dropped out and switched to Big L Libertarian after getting elected. You can find these stories on the LP National website from like the late 2010s. He then ran in his next election as a state rep, as a Libertarian. You did all the door knocking, did all the campaigning, the same as he did as a Republican. He got well under 10% of the vote. 2 years later, he ran again as a Republican, moved back to the Republican Party, and got elected again, no problem, right? And so this is the same person and these districts are small. We're talking about under 4,000 people. So it's enough that like you can actually meet all of these people, you can knock all their doors, and there's just a bunch of people who just go in and vote Republican, and you can't get them to think of you as an individual. Like, oh, that's Brandon. Right. I liked Brandon. I'm going to vote for Brandon, even though there's a different letter next to his name. And so it's like, I see an experiment like that, and like I can't argue that Republicans should switch to the Libertarian Party. It appears very difficult to run and win compared to running as a Republican.
And I know we don't want to keep you for too long because you have a life.
Yeah, we're having a lazy Sunday today, so it's all right.
When you look at the act locally mindset, do you believe it's going to be easier for most libertarian-minded individuals to get involved and start gaining traction at their municipal level and their county level, or do you think they have to take runs at either state office or national office?
I think running in local nonpartisan races is one of the clear ways. If you are committed to running as a libertarian, running for local nonpartisan races is your best chance, because then the letters, when any election where the letters are next to the name, you just lose a lot of people. I was looking this up. I'm fairly sure, and I'd be welcome to be contradicted by this. I'm not the number one most knowledge of libertarian history, but as far as I can tell, there has never been a three-way race between a Democrat, Republican, and Libertarian. So all three are in the race. That's head-to-head, like winner take all, not a multi-vote, that for state or federal office that a Libertarian has ever won, ever, in 50 years. Like the best Libertarian victories that they claim are always ones that are either multi-races where it's like a bunch of people get in, or they weren't head-to-head. It was a Libertarian against a Democrat directly, or a Libertarian against a Republican directly, and there wasn't all three weren't on the ballot. As far as I can tell,
I've never been able to find one either. So,
yeah. So it's like, I mean, that's a lot of history. That's a lot of tries, at this. And so, if all of these people are very attached to their DRR, label, like part of being an entrepreneur is you meet your customers where they are, right? There's a sense in which like your customer is right. If you make a sandwich, your customer is right. It doesn't matter if your sandwich tastes good to you. Like the aesthetic preferences of your customer are in the marketplace sort of objectively correct, and so we cannot like that people have these preferences, but they appear to have them. They appear to be sincere. They appear to be consistent and robust. And so it's like, well, I have to meet the world where it is.
Do you see light at the end of the tunnel, in the sense of, do you think the last couple of election cycles at the presidential level have created a desire in people to lean more towards liberty-minded policies and philosophies, or do you see it just bouncing back and forth between left authoritarianism and right authoritarianism?
So I think the last couple of years have been good. There will always be this contingent of libertarian, like there's a sort of psychological archetype of the libertarian, and the ideas, as long as the ideas continue to float around out there, they will take hold in people. And so the more that they're talked about, the more people who get exposed to them, and the people for whom they are capable of taking hold in, they'll take hold in those people. But they at the same time, they don't take hold in a lot of other people. And so we have to sort of square both these realities. I was excited for Doge. I had maybe hopes that were too high. It does seem like it
was easy to do. It was easy to be really excited.
Here's another way to put it. Like there's this complete mismatch, and it's not the first time I've seen this from Republicans, but there's this complete mismatch, so far as I can tell, between rhetoric and what's happening. And so some of the rhetoric, like it's great to have a president saying, let's end the income tax, right? But ending the income tax requires actual actions. Like it's great to have a president who says he wants to end the DOE, and maybe we're on track to do that, but like you're attacking the guy with an actual bill. Like you can't actually end the DOE by fiat. Like it does actually require a regulatory act. Like and so there's this rhetoric that doesn't match reality. The rhetoric seems good. I'm not knocking the rhetoric, but it's got to meet reality. And so it does seem to me that America is not just America, honestly, every Western democracy. One of my favorite graphs is percentage of GDP controlled by governments. And we've been on a runaway train for over 100 years, and we haven't seen any democracy correct in a serious way. The fact that the government is just controlling more and more and more of the economy. And what's happening now that I think will be one of the most interesting things in the world, generally interesting in the true Chinese curse sense. It's unclear if this will be good or bad, but is that we're sorting ourselves out by our political views. We're both in who we partner with and have children with, where political affiliation is now one of the biggest factors in mate choice, and it's also a huge factor in where people are moving to. So red people are leaving blue states and going to red states, and blue people are leaving red states and going to blue states. And so we're seeing this like assortation, and that is, I think, relatively unprecedented in American in American history. And so where this goes, like, it's tough to play all of this out and understand where it all goes. But I think this is going to be a big deal. I think this is going to have like a lot of impact on politics, and could potentially be the thing that leads to a fracturing of the United States, or maybe a return to greater federalism, or these kinds of things, because these disagreements are only going to get stronger.
Well, you guys actually in New Hampshire have a network of supporting people who moved there to be part of the movement. I've heard it, mentioned. I cannot think of her name right now. She's been on with Tom a few times, but and I'm pretty sure I heard you say it when you were on with Tom. If you come to New Hampshire and you need to, we will help you find work. We will help plug you into the system. And that it to me that's saying so much about how important political ideology and philosophy have become, not at a culture war sense, but at like the very survival of the republic literally hinges on aligning yourself with like-minded people. And like you said, pointing out the fact that people are now making, marriage partner choices on these things. 50 years ago, your dad didn't care if your mom voted Republican or Democrat. It was really, is she hot? And will she let me ride in my motorcycle? That's what it was. Now It's like, I don't care how hot she is. Did you see who she voted for? It literally is. Now that also has some drawbacks. It's encouraging on some levels, but it also has some drawbacks, because then you begin to create an echo chamber for yourself. But it can lead to a lot more sanity in a home, which then leads to, I think, more stable children. And children who are.
Well, I'll tell you, there's definitely some interesting experiments in child rearing, going on here, where it's a bunch of libertarians, raising kids with other libertarians. But it's absolutely true that there's a dense network here, and I'm well, and maybe this is even a good note to end on. I'm happy to talk to anyone. So anyone who wants to reach out to me, we're sort of like we're like libertarian Mormons. So, you're giving me a chance to do my form of service. I'm happy to help people with introductions, meeting other people, jobs, questions, whatever. Often what I do is actually just introduce people, because I've ended up with a very wide, network. So it's not even necessarily me doing these things, but anyone who reaches out to me, I can get you connected to sort of the right kind of person. Especially, I will say, I'm obviously especially interested in people who want to come and be politically engaged and but I mean, I'm interested in anyone. Hey, if you want to show here and just show up in New Hampshire and just vote, you're clearly, you're at least helping at the margin. But the people I'm the most excited about are people who want to really get involved, who want to help take over the political system and take over the institutions here, so that they're controlled by libertarians.
Well, to close out, I asked this. Now I've started making this part of all of my libertarian lowdowns. Top 3 libertarian podcasts that you recommend. And don't worry, I don't have enough of an audience. You're going to upset any of your regulars.
This is perhaps a dirty secret that I'm letting out here. I actually don't listen to too many podcasts. I tend to more, and if I do, it's often I'm more like, oh, I like that guest, or I want to hear that that guest. I do enjoy it was certainly among, if I counted up my views, I would guess Michael Malice and Dave Smith are near the top of how many I've listened to. So that's like
that's why I ask, is for these kind of answers.
But it's and Tom Woods probably, but it's often it's like, oh, I want to hear Tom talk to this guest, or I want to hear Malice talk to this guest, and it's not. I'm generally not listening to
just because. Yeah. Biggest recommendation or best recommendation for digestible book or books for libertarian thought?
So I'll get at least like slightly out of the libertarian sphere. I think there's an economist named Robin Hanson out of GMU, and he is a libertarian leaning economist, but he's been one of the more fascinating thinkers I've found. And he has a book called The Elephant in the Brain that I really enjoyed, that I think introduces some really interesting concepts. And it's basically, libertarians, I think, often sort of we tend to be interested in sort of like the truth. We're very like truth seeking people. What's the underlying, what's real here? And he's very good at, he changed my views. Even honestly, some of the stuff that I was saying about healthcare earlier in this podcast was literally me just regurgitating his ideas. They're not they're not even mine, and so he's a very interesting thinker who's changed my perspective on sort of why does society work this way? Why do we do some of these things? And he gives answers that are that seem truthful to me.
And do you have a particular fiction book or TV show or movie that you think has, whether they meant it or not, demonstrates libertarian ideals?
Oh, I'll plug. I loved these books. They're going to be a movie one day. It's the Powers of the Earth series by Travis Corcoran. If you're into relatively hard sci-fi with libertarian leanings, I think you've got to check out these books. They won the Prometheus Award for best libertarian sci-fi book at least one of the years. And so he is also a free stater. But I was actually reading him before I even knew him in real life. Very smart guy, and they're very good, enjoyable books.
Say that again.
It's called The Powers of the Earth.
Powers of the Earth, and that's a series.
Yeah, I believe it's called the Aristoteles. It's either called the Power of the Earth series or the Aristoteles series, and it's about basically government on Earth becomes totalitarian and people flee to the moon, and it's sort of, I wouldn't say it copies the moon as a harsh mistress.
I was just gonna say, what is it with the moon and libertarians?
It's and the moon and the harsh mistress is a very good book, by the way. So I'm a fan of that one as well, and I would say it perhaps draws a little bit from that, but it's definitely a different book, and it's worth reading. It's not just like a ripoff of that book.
Oh, that's really cool. You guys working on Defend the Guard out there?
Yeah, we are. I will admit that I haven't put a ton of my personal energy into that one, but I know that there are a lot of people out here. What
are you doing? Come on, don't you have?
I clicked the retweet button at least. I mean, there's a great activist here named Derek Prohl who works real hard on that. He works hard on a ton of issues. He's a great activist, but he's pressing that issue hard. It's definitely going to get through the House this year, and I think the struggle is going to be the Senate. But there's a real move and there's a real effort, and hopefully it'll get through.
That's awesome. Well, tell everybody where they can find you, and I'll put the link to your Twix.
Yeah, mostly just X. X is where I'm the most active for sure. I actually have started posting like lifestyle pictures to Instagram, so if people want to see that side of it, I'm Free State Jeremy on Instagram, and I also have a Substack that I don't write very much on. But if you want to follow me for my one post every 6 months, when I conquer my ADD enough to write something.
I was just going to say, careful, because when you tell people you have a Substack, then they start demanding you use it, and that's how I got sucked in.
But yeah, X, I post multiple times, basically every day on X, and so if you want to see my sort of off the cuff thoughts on things, that's the best place to follow me.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time, and I know you're having a lazy Sunday, but I know you're an hour ahead of me, so I think you probably got to start getting ready for all your gaming tonight, don't you?
That's right. So thanks. have a good day. Good night.
Thank you very much. All right, folks. This I really wanted Jeremy on for the premiere for season 4, just because I love his energy. I and like he said, he gets to be real and not just break everything down into these quips. And as you can see, he's a deep thinker, and that's incredibly important, especially if you're going to be libertarian. I'm going to say something, and this is just me. I'm not speaking for anybody else. It's way too easy to just, as we talked about extensively, to vote for somebody because they have a D behind their name and an R behind their name and not really pay any attention to what they actually believe. Folks, you got to start drilling in on these things. I've heard people say we're on the cusp of losing the republic. Folks, I don't know if cusp is the right word. I think we're in the last throes of a dying republic. And you need to have your legs under you. You need to have your feet ready to hit the ground and be running so you could salvage something in the end. When Rome fell, Romans weren't going, "Oh, the republic is falling." It fell well ahead of time. And it caught them all by surprise. And it sent the world into chaos. I don't know if we can salvage the Republic the way it was meant to be, but we can salvage our culture and our societies if we have more people like Jeremy out there pushing for liberty, pushing for independence and free thought. And I've been watching him from afar for a while, and finally reached out, and he said he'll talk to anybody. Like, folks, he talked to me. So get to know him, follow him, follow the Free State Project. And if you're tired of Minnesota, or you're tired of the state you're in because it's leaning too authoritarian one way or another, I've heard it from dozens of people. New Hampshire is a place to head to. And you know what? They have almost as beautiful falls as we do in Minnesota. Almost. They don't have the kind of water that we have here. So thank you for tuning in for this episode of Libertarian Lowdown, season 4, folks. Season 4 of Libertarian Lowdown. Can you believe that? And we've arrived. We've had Spike Cohen, we've had Clint Russell, we've had Monica Perez, and now Jeremy. So like this, I have like nowhere to go but like get better now, or I might as well just like wrap it up, because when you lead off your season with Jeremy Kauffman, how do you improve on that, unless Jeremy can give me the hookup to get Dave on? But pie in the sky, but that's fine. We'll work with that, folks. Listen to this numerous times, and then go check out all of the work that they're doing in New Hampshire for the Free State Project. And if you want to get fired up and have a good chuckle, pay attention to the fire that he spits on X. It will entertain you and educate you all at the same time. So my friends, until next time, as Monica, my friend, made for me my hand-printed tagline: fight for your liberty, it is yours. Fight for your freedom, it belongs to you. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are going for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at